bereft family, friends, and colleagues, in solidarity with the little 7-year-old children in Ashling's class who lost their teacher. We know that also that we're coming together at this moment after there's been an explosion of gender-based violence during the pandemic in Ireland and all around the world. And so we're also here to say, from catcalling to online abuse to inter-partner violence, we are here to bring these issues out of the shadows and onto the streets in solidarity, so we can really explain that we want to save not one more mental or physical health of a person can be harmed from abuse, that not one more femicide can happen, and that not one more child can be left without their mom. There's too many to mention in terms of children who've been left bereft as a result of femicide, so I'm just going to mention two of the mothers killed in the recent years, both who were essential workers, as Ashling herself was. And these two that I will mention are Jenny Poole, a 24-year-old mother of two, a nursing home worker from Thinglas, and Iran Sarendra Dorj, killed 1 year ago this month in a random attack, a cleaner just on her way home from work, as Therese mentioned. Fed up with victim-blaming tropes, yet more sexism that focuses on what women wear, where we walk, who we keep company, and so on. It's really heartening to see that the discussion has shifted away from that. And it is importantly emphasising that the issue is men's violence and behaviour that has to change and end. We're not talking about women and what we do anymore. That has to end. And it is true that men do have to question how they've been socialised by a deeply sexist and misogynistic system. It's easy to react in anger against an imagined image of a distant perpetrator. But actually, we have to, do a lot more than that, to listen to the stories of women and gender non-conforming people and what we experience every single day, and to realise that we've all been socialised in a deeply sexist system, and we want to change and become better humans as a whole. And I'm optimistic about that, about ordinary men that we love, that we work with every single day. I'm optimistic about the change that we can collectively bring when we come together in struggle and solidarity, as we did in the repeal movement, for example. I'm optimistic about the example I saw in the Basque Country just last November, when Erica Tavares, a Mercedes car worker, was tragically killed in intimate partner violence, and her thousands and thousands of colleagues, the majority of whom are men, went on strike against femicide in solidarity with their beloved colleague Erica. I am, I have to say, a little bit cynical about politicians from establishment parties making these points. I'm not terribly interested in their personal journeys that they're making as men. These are people in parties that have been hand in glove in the deeply misogynistic nature of the Irish state. And we know that the state and successive governments have perpetrated precisely the culture in which gender-based violence has flourished. Give you some examples. I'll just name them really quickly to paint a picture of the type of deep-rooted change that we have to come together and demand. The cancelled 999 calls, the 7 women a day that were turned away from chronically underfunded refuges during the first lockdown, the mother and baby homes, and the disrespect and gaslighting by this government of the mother and baby home survivors. The fact that most sexual assaults are not even reported, and those recorded, there's only 10% conviction rate, and that meanwhile underwear of women have been shown in court by defence lawyers. The housing crisis, the fact that We know it's extremely difficult to leave an abusive relationship, no matter what your circumstances are, because abuse is about knocking you as a person, knocking your confidence in every single way imaginable. But we know that it's an absolute barrier if you have absolutely no options in terms of housing, and that your choice to leave an abusive relationship is a choice to bring you and your children into homelessness. A choice that women are making every single day in this state because of the policies of successive governments. We have a situation in Ireland where there's sex-segregated primary and secondary schools, and public schools in which the Catholic Church has major influence. When we talk about how deep-rooted gender norms are, and toxic gender norms, of course that's not going to change in this type of fight backwards public schooling. I just have to quickly say in one line that the movement that we must build will have no room for racism and no room for transphobia. I think we need a clap for that just to show that is a they're all at the root of the problem, and we stand against all of them together and united. I want to close my remarks by saying, I don't know if many of you realise, but this year, later October this year, will mark 10 years since the death of Savita Halappanavar. Many of us who are here today, Ruth, many other people, when this death of Savita happened as a result of state misogyny, a woman's life being equated with that of a fetus in our constitution, and how objectifying and dehumanising of a woman can he get. When Savita died, many of us made the promise to Savita that we would never, ever let that happen again. And look what that movement achieved. There's still some people who have to travel to get abortions. That has to change. Government, by the way, listening, we're all being very sensitive on this issue. We want some action. But we achieved abortion rights in a massive popular vote because of the movement that Savita's unbearably tragic and needless death happened. We have to make the same collective promise to Ashling Murphy. Never again. Now I have to say, so 10 years ago many people said, oh, you'll never win abortion rights in Ireland, Catholic country, blah, blah, blah. We obviously proved them wrong. I do think it's an even bigger challenge that we have to wage to win an ending of gender-based violence. And that's because misogyny and sexism are so systemic, so deep-rooted. It will take a major struggle and movement. I'm optimistic because we have to be optimistic. I'm thinking today about a socialist feminist from a century ago, Rosa Luxemburg, whose anniversary of her death is today. And one of the things that Rosa Luxemburg said is, those who do not move do not notice their chains. The midst of the pandemic has made people question so much about the whole way society is organised. You have the Great Resignation, millions of people quitting their jobs saying, because the pandemic has made them question, why should I work in this incredibly exploitative situation for this horrible, profit-making, planet-polluting company and so on, and they're looking to change and they're looking for difference. It also made us look at the importance of care workers and the essence of what they do, that we want that the centre of society, not the thing that's devalued, whereas, profit, consumerism, all the things that are valued in the society we live in today. We see Greta Thunberg and those young people who are envisioning a future, a real future for the planet. And I have to look at all that because it's only a very optimistic movement based on the majority of people's desire for change that we can build the type of struggle and movement necessary. We said, Savita, never again. We have to say, and maybe we could say collectively, Ashling Murphy, we make a promise to you to say, never again. Maybe we'll say, do you want to say it again? Never again. So we have to harness the potential now to uproot the system and to deliver this collective promise to Ashling. Thanks.
Murphy? Never again. Ashling Murphy? Never again. Okay, I'm going to call on everybody just to take part in a minute's silence now. Just before we leave, just to kind of do very brief things, that some of us have been here before. We marched after the Belfast rugby rape trial, and we said, I believe her, and we stand for her. We also said this is not consent when a young girl in Cork had her underwear used in argument against her. But we're here today and in the last few days in just multiples of those numbers. And I think, although a growing consciousness on gender violence and on misogyny in general has been happening, among young people in particular who've led the way, and among women, a dam seems to have burst. And now it has broadened out to a much wider section of society. And that's extremely positive. And we don't want to let this moment pass. We have to seize moments in history when something happens. The best, most fitting legacy we could give Ashling Murphy, as has been said by Laura, is to make a change. No woman should live in fear. No woman should be dying in any way, in any circumstances, be it day, be it night, be it with somebody they know or from a stranger. And we have to use the grief and anger and the phenomenon that's developed now to demand change. Change, it isn't simple. It's actually a very complex problem. We're not foolish. But yes, we have to put demands on government. It's not good enough to listen to Josepha Madigan telling us all to get panic buttons, telling us all to buy gym indoor membership so we didn't have to run on the streets. That's exactly what we don't want to hear. That's exactly the type of victim blaming that we just don't need anymore. And it's also the type of performative actions that we've seen from far too many people in power, where they talk about their own individual circumstances, very welcome, but they have the power to do something, and if they don't do it, well, then they have to be called out. And we need a lead. We don't expect anything. This is like the repeal movement. We forced them to grant us our bodily autonomy. We forced them, young people, women, LGBT plus people. It did not come, it was not granted. We've had to fight for every right in this world. These things are not granted from Parliament, and we will be making a mistake if we just pack up our bags and expect something to happen from the Dáil on Wednesday, because we have to learn that we will have to build a movement. And I'm asking everybody here to commit. In 2 months' time, we will have International Women's Day. Can we make that day or that week, whatever, a phenomenal movement against gender-based violence? Notwithstanding COVID, which hopefully will be under control, can we bring people onto the streets, out of the shadows, onto the streets in their tens and tens of thousands together, in a united call for emergency action for this shadow pandemic? what the UN itself has called a shadow pandemic, where calls have increased by 43% for help. And yet the Gardaí haven't been answering the calls. Now, we all want the Gardaí to catch the perpetrator, to bring them to justice. But we also want them to answer the calls when we call them for help. And that has not been happening. And that's an absolute disgrace. And Helen McEntee is the Minister for Justice. What is she going to do about it? Because they've been obfuscating and answering as to why they haven't done that. And it included women and children from their homes and women out on the streets as well. And I can bet my bottom dollar that most of those calls were not answered properly or followed up because they were either working class or travellers or minorities. I'm staking my life on that now. So we are welcoming of men becoming educated. And this is, we all know, the not all men stuff is rubbish, and it's not even the feeling of most men. But there has to be a reckoning as to why rigid gender roles and the type of society we have has led to such a proliferation of male violence against women, because that is what it is. And if we want a reckoning on that, it involves people questioning themselves, but it also involves people questioning this type of society and system that's brought that about. And I think, some of those points have been made today. So before you leave, I would really exhort again that people would just sign up, maybe just leave your name, your mobile number, so you can be texted, or take a leaflet so you can get the barcode for the meeting on Thursday, because we don't want to let this moment pass. We want to seize it. And just to learn one lesson from history, I was here 10 years ago. Every time Savita's name is mentioned, I break down, but after the death of Savita, the mood was palpable as well. And I'm giving a commitment that we won't let this moment pass a decade later. This is our next issue, that we all must work together, men, women, and children as well, who are the victims, coming together to absolutely demand that this is treated like a pandemic. So thank you very much for coming
Oh yeah, that's true.
We're doing that closely, we're trying to get to the point where we think, but we just thought people.
Sorry, Ruth.
But you'll get like, did you just sign that today?
Yes, I did.
Well, what probably happened is you're going to get added to the website. And then you'll sign and then we have to do
Interested in making a comment. Interested in making a comment on how you think
All the stuff, the whole idea of like,
But I'm still going to ask them in and have it on YouTube, TikTok,
I'm scared of
just
I'd love to, but I would need to practice.
Yeah, well, I think there's so many. There's countless vigils taking place, and I think this was very young people who we also wanted to express our grief with what happened with Ashling, send our solidarity to her family. But I think there's also a hunger and fight to do to the first time. They can't. So this opportunity can't be wasted. Where we become conscious about how we're, like under illustrations.
and like even if you did something not like it, speak something practical at the meeting, or you could like prepare a little thing to say. So like we would usually give it a background reading beforehand, and then everyone gets a chance to kind of add to the argument.
I was literally getting up for my phone.
Thanks a lot.